Thank you for being here. My name is Elizabeth Pena, and I am the interim dean of the Graduate Theological Union here in Berkeley, California. And in that role, it's my privilege to welcome you to today's panel, The War in Ukraine and Its Religious Roots. This panel was put together by Thomas Cattoi, who is Associate Professor of Christology and Cultures at the Jesuit School of Theology at Santa Clara University. He's also a core doctoral faculty member of the Graduate Theological Union. Dr. Cattoi is a very accomplished scholar and a valued teacher and colleague, and his research has been extraordinarily broad and very deep, with recent work in mysticism and the theology of interreligious dialogue. And I just want to give him full credit for being the one to organize this panel, which is such an important issue for us to discuss. And we feel very fortunate that he is here at the GTU and able to help us understand in this way. And he has brought together two colleagues to help him on this panel. And I'm very pleased to introduce them. First is Dr. John Klentos, who is the Spanos Associate Professor of Eastern Orthodox Christian Studies.
Oh, what's going on? Oh, God. I'll go do it again.
Okay, he is, I don't know what happened there. The Spanos, Dr. John Klentos, the Associate Professor of Eastern Orthodox Christian Studies at the Patriarch Athenagoras Orthodox Institute, also a core doctoral faculty member at the Graduate Theological Union. And finally, I'd like to introduce Vitaliy Osmolovskyy, a Jesuit priest who is an ecclesiastical doctorate student at the Jesuit School of Theology. And I want to acknowledge that he's joining us all the way from Warsaw today. And so without further ado, Dr. Cattoi, I hand it over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Pena, and thank you for your very generous, words. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm going to share my screen, and I hope you can all see what I'm going to show you. And please, I have to again ask you, all of you, to please mute yourselves, because otherwise we're going to have an echo of a lot of voices. Okay, so I hope you can see this, and let's see from the beginning. So I'm going to give you a historical overview, really, of the situation, starting from this map of Kievan Rus. Now, the tale of bygone years, Powieść Wymiennych Liet, which is often known in English as the Rus Primary Chronicle, or the Primary Chronicle, is the fundamental source for the history of Kievan Rus. It was compiled between probably 1110 and 1120, and it traces the history of Kievan Rus from the mid-9th century until the beginning of the 12th century. And this chronicle traces the history of the nation of Kievan Rus, which was a loose federation of East Slavic, Baltic, and Finnic peoples in Eastern and Northern Europe, which lasted from the late 9th to the mid-13th century, until the reign of under the reign of the Rurik dynasty. So if you could look at this map, you can see Kiev here in the middle. You see White Rus here, which is really contemporary Belarus. And you can actually see the contemporary borders actually traced underneath this red map. You can actually see Suzdal up here, which is one of the cities of the Golden Ring around Moscow, but you don't even really see Moscow, because Moscow, for the longest period of time in Kievan Rus, was really just a trading outpost at the margins of the state, and didn't really play any primary, political role. Now, according to the primary chronicle that I mentioned, the first ruler who started to unify these East Slavic lands into what became known as Kievan Rus was Prince Oleg, who reigned between 879 and 1912. And he extended his control from Novgorod south all the way along the Dnieper River, which is in the news very much these days. But the most important figure, perhaps, is is Vladimir the Great, who reigned between 980 and 1015, and he introduce Christianity into Kievan Rus. He was baptized in Chersonesos in the year 988, and Chersonesos is down here. You see, you can probably see it on the map. It says here Chersones. It has a Greek name because, of course, this was actually a Greek Byzantine colony for the longest of time. There are still, Greek speaking minorities in Mariupol and in this area of Ukraine even today. So, in 980, Vladimir accepts Christianity. And it's very interesting because in the primary chronicle, there is this history of Prince Vladimir sending out emissaries to different locations, and the results are all described by the chronicler Nestor, who talks about, how Vladimir could not accept Islam because Islam was undesirable due to its prohibition of alcohol and pork. Judaism was not acceptable because the fall of the city of Jerusalem probably was the proof of the fact that the Jews had been rejected by God. But the emissaries attended the liturgy in Saint Sophia, Hagia Sophia, in Constantinople, and they were so overwhelmed by the beauty and the majesty of this liturgy that they decided that they would accept Christianity in its Eastern expression. Although if you look at the dates, we are talking about 988. This is before the schism between the Western and the Eastern churches that took place in 1054. And of course, as it would often be the case, the monarch actually implemented, the religious conversion of his whole people when he moved back to Kiev. And Kiev becomes a center of Eastern Christianity and monasticism. In the year 1051, you have the establishment of the Monastery of the Caves, the Kievo-Piacerska Lavra. This is a contemporary picture, and a lot of what you see here was actually rebuilt after 1990, admittedly, because during the Soviet period, a lot of these buildings were actually destroyed. So, but the monastery, in fact, it's going to, in 30 years, if it's still there, it's going to celebrate 1,000 years. And this was really one of the most important centers for Eastern Orthodox monasticism. Many people will come from Athos there, or go to Athos and come back and bring sort of Athonite Byzantine spirituality to Kiev. Now, what happens is that the great horde of Mongols in the 13th century destroys Kievan Rus, and the political and religious center of Eastern Slavic politics and religion shifts northwards to the Moscow Grand Duchy. And I know that you probably cannot read this very well. Oh, actually, this is in Russian, but Moscow is here. Here is the Novgorod Republic, and in the 14th and the 15th century, the Grand Duchy of Moscow expands. But a very important event in 1325, the Orthodox Metropolitan of Kiev transfers his residence to Vladimir, which is another of the cities of the Golden Ring around Moscow, and then to Moscow. So after this date, essentially the Grand Duchy of Moscow views itself as the sort of legitimate successor of Kievan Rus, according to the medieval principle of translatio imperi. And the fact that the Metropolitan moves from Kiev to Moscow also gives them further religious legitimacy. If you know anything about Russian history, you will also remember that thanks to the marriage of one of the Tsars to the niece of the last Byzantine emperor, the Grand Duke of Moscow then views himself also as the heir of the Byzantine Empire. So essentially you have this convergence of the Kievan state and the Byzantine state coming together in the figure of the Russian monarch who takes the title of emperor, in the 16th century.